Revenge with Karen. The air in the boardroom on the 42nd floor always smelled the same. A sterile blend of lemon polish, cooled, recirculated air, and the metallic tang of fear. I had spent 15 years learning to breathe that air, learning to navigate the currents of power that flowed through the hallways of Sterling Heart like electricity. I was the senior liaison for strategic partnerships. It was a title that sounded boring to the uninitiated. To anyone who actually knew how money moved in the city, it meant I held the keys to the kingdom. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. My power was in the silence between signatures, in the nod across a mahogany table, in the $3 billion merger. I had spent the last 9 months sculpting from a block of chaotic raw data into a masterpiece of corporate synergy. I was standing by the floor-ceiling window, reviewing the final clauses on my tablet, and the door slammed open. It wasn't just an entrance, it was an invasion. Cassidy, the newly appointed VP's daughter, clacked into the room. She was 24 years old, armed with a freshly printed MBA that her father had likely paid a building wing for, and wearing a smirk that suggested she thought she was the main character in a movie. Everyone else was just lucky to be extras in. It was her first day. Literally, her first hour. "Excuse me." Voice cut through the hum of the office like a serrated knife. She wasn't looking at the view. She was looking at me. Or, rather, she was looking at my torso. I lowered the tablet slowly, turning to face her with the practiced neutrality I used for erratic investors. "Can I help you, Cassidy? I'm Emily. We were supposed to meet at I Know Who You Are," she interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. She was holding a thick spiral-bound book, the employee handbook relic from the 9S that nobody had actually opened since the invention of the iPhone. "And I know what you're doing, reviewing the merger protocols for the Sterling deal," I offered, keeping my voice level. "No," she sneered, stepping closer. She smelled of overpowering jasmine perfume and insecurity. "You are violating Code 4 Section B regarding appropriate client F-facing attire." I blinked. I was wearing a vintage Armani blazer, charcoal gray, with pearl buttons paired with tailored slacks, and a leather tote that cost more than her car. It was the armor of a woman who closed deals. "I'm sorry, the pearl buttons," she said, tapping the handbook with a manicured nail. "The handbook clearly states standardized closures only. And that bag, it looks distressed. We don't do distressed here. We represent excellence." The room had gone dead silent. The analysts in the glass cubicles outside had stopped typing. Junior associates were freezing mid-sip of their lattes. This is the part where I usually tell people that if you enjoy watching train wrecks in slow motion or stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, you should probably take a second to hit that follow button and upvote, because trust me, the crash is coming. But right then, nobody was moving. "Cassidy," I said, my voice dropping an octave deadly calm, "am meeting with Marcus Sterling in 48 hours to finalize a $3 billion acquisition. This blazer is not the issue. The issue is that you are interrupting my preparation." She turned a shade of red that clashed with her scarf. She wasn't used to push back. She was used to Daddy's credit card and terrified interns. "I am the Vice President's Chief of Staff," she announced, throwing a title around that I knew didn't technically exist for her pay grade. "I am enforcing standards. If you can't follow the basic rules of this company, how can we trust you with its future?" It was so absurd, I almost laughed, but I saw the gleam in her eye. She didn't care about the buttons. She wanted a scalp. She wanted to prove on day one that she was the alpha predator. She had picked me because I looked established, and taking down the matriarch is the quickest way to scare the pack. "Go home, change. Write a formal apology to HR for the infraction," she commanded, crossing her arms. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tremor in her hands, the desperate need for validation. I also saw the complete lack of understanding of what I actually did. No, I said simply, "Excuse me, no, I have work to do." I turned back to the window. "You're fired," she shrieked. The words hung in the air, heavy and ridiculous. I turned back around. She was panting slightly, eyes wide. She had committed. She had pulled the trigger. "You can't be serious," I said, not pleading but analyzing. "I am your superior by proxy, and you are insubordinate." She yelled, her voice cracking. "Pack your things. Security will escort you out." Now I looked at the terrified faces of the analysts outside the glass. I looked at the $3 billion contract on my tablet, and then a strange cold clarity washed over me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt relieved. "Okay," I said. Cassidy blinked, expecting a fight, expecting begging. "Okay, you're right, Cassidy," I said, snapping the cover of my tablet shut. "Standards are important. I'll pack my things immediately." I didn't wait for her response. I walked past her, my shoulder brushing hers, and headed for my office. She thought she had just exerted dominance. She had no idea she had just pulled the pin on a grenade that wouldn't explode for 48 hours. It just fired the only person in the hemisphere who could interpret the handshake codes of the Sterling family. As I walked down the hall, I didn't look back, but I could feel her staring, confused by my compliance, wondering why the kill felt so empty. My office was a sanctuary of controlled chaos. Unlike the sterile minimalism of the boardroom, my desk was a landscape of stacked DOSes, legal pads filled with shorthand that only I could decipher, a Rex that was, ironically, the most valuable object in the entire building. Cassidy probably thought everything was digitized. She didn't understand that in the world of high-stakes mergers, the real deals were made on personal cell numbers written on the back of cocktail napkins and business cards kept in leather binders. I didn't rush. Rushing implies guilt, or at least panic. I had neither. I opened my drawers with the slow precision of a bomb disposal technician. First, the personal items. The framed photo of my father, who had taught me that integrity is expensive, but desperation costs more. The crystal paperweight Marcus Sterling had given me after we closed the Tokyo deal 5 years ago. And then the Rolodex. I dropped it into my distressed leather tote. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. I could see my assistant Sarah hovering in the doorway. She was pale, her hands twisting a tissue into confetti. "Emily," she whispered as if speaking too loud might summon the demon in the hallway. "Is it true? Did she actually—" "It's true, Sarah," I said, keeping my voice soft. I picked up a stack of files, the preliminary due diligence for the Sterling merger. I held them for a second, weighing them. These were the company copies. Technically, they belonged here. I set them back down on the desk, right in the center. "But the merger," Sarah stammered. "The meeting is in 2 days. Nobody else knows the leverage ratios. Nobody else knows about the appendix clauses. I'm sure Cassidy is very capable," I said, and the lie tasted sweet like cyanide. "She has an MBA, Sarah. She reads the handbook." I cleared my computer history. I logged out of the encrypted server. I wiped the local cache. I wasn't destroying company property. I was simply removing my personal intellectual footprint. If they wanted to navigate the labyrinth of this deal, they would have to do it with the maps they had on file, not the shortcuts in my head. I put on my coat. It was cashmere, soft and warm against the sudden chill of the office air conditioning. I picked up my tote. When I stepped out of my office, the entire floor was pretending to work. Heads were bowed, but eyes were darting. The silence was deafening, was the silence of a crew watching the captain being thrown overboard by a mutineer who didn't know how to read a compass. Cassidy was waiting by the elevators. She had her arms crossed, tapping her foot, flanked by two uncomfortable-looking security guards who knew me by name. Make sure she didn't take any proprietary data. Cassidy snapped at them. Bob, the head of floor security, looked at me with apologetic eyes. He'd seen me work late nights for 10 years, seen me order pizza for his team during holidays. She's clean, Miss Cassidy. Bob mumbled, not even checking my bag. Cassidy scoffed. Fine, just get her out. I want this toxicity off my floor. I stopped in front of the elevator and pressed the button. I waited for the ding. When the door slid open, I turned to Cassidy. She was bracing for a curse, a shout, a "You'll regret this." Instead, I smiled. It was a genuine smile, kind you give someone who has unknowingly just handed you a winning lottery ticket while thinking it's a parking fine. "Thank you, Cassidy," I said, her brow furrowed. The confusion cracked her mask of arrogance for a split second. "What?" For clarifying the priorities of this organization, I said it's been illuminating. Good luck with the merger. The appendices are tricky. I stepped into the elevator. "What appendices?" she demanded, stepping forward as the doors began to close. "File is complete." I saw the digital drive. "Digital drives are so impersonal," I said softly. The door slid shut, cutting off her face just as the panic started to creep into her eyes. As the elevator descended, gravity pulled at my stomach, but my spirit soared. I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. By noon, the legal department would be asking questions. By 2 p.m., the partners would be confused. By tomorrow morning, the hemorrhage would begin. I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sunshine of the city. I didn't hail a cab. I walked 2 blocks to a quiet cafe, ordered a double espresso, and sat by the window. I took my phone out of my bag and turned it off, let them sit in the silence for a while. I spent the afternoon at an art gallery. I stared at abstract expressionist paintings, chaos contained within frames, and felt a profound sense of kinship. It was amazing how much detail you missed in the world when you were busy carrying the weight of $1 billion corporation on your shoulders. For the first time in a decade, I noticed the texture of the paint, the brush strokes, the silence. It wasn't until 6 p.m. when I was back in my apartment pouring a glass of Nibio that I decided to turn my phone back on. The device buzzed in my hand like an angry hornet. It didn't stop vibrating for a full 2 minutes. Screen lit up with a cascade of notifications, a digital avalanche of regret. 14 missed calls from office. Sarah, 3 missed calls from HR director. 5 missed calls from unknown number 27 new emails. I took a sip of wine, savoring the tannins, and scrolled through the text messages. Sarah, 11:30 a.m. Emily, legal just came down. They're asking who authorized your termination. Cassidy is locked in her office. Sarah, 12:45 p.m. The partners from the Tokyo firm tried to call you. Cassidy took the call. It didn't go well. She told them you were no longer a cultural fit. There was a lot of yelling in Japanese. Sarah, 2:30 p.m. Where are the appendix files? Cassidy is screaming at it. She says you deleted them. It says they never existed on the server. Emily, everyone is freaking out. I smiled, swirling the wine in the glass. Of course, they weren't on the server. The appendix files weren't documents. They were the nuances. They were the handshake agreements regarding the retention of key staff in the acquired company. They were the verbal promises I had made to Marcus Sterling about the preservation of his family's legacy branding. They were in the notes I took by hand, the notes that were currently sitting in the fireplace of my apartment turning into ash. I opened an email from the general counsel. If at Thorne, David was a good man, but he was spineless when it came to the board. Subject, urgent employment status / misunderstanding Emily. There seems to have been a significant breakdown in communication regarding protocol enforcement. Please call me immediately. We need to discuss a reinstatement of your contract before the Sterling meeting. We can smooth this over. Cassidy is new and perhaps overzealous. Let's not let emotions derail the merger. Emotions? I whispered to the empty room. They always called it emotions when a woman reacted, but strategy when a man did. I didn't reply. I could picture the scene at the office perfectly. The sun would be setting, casting long, accusing shadows across the open floor plan. Cassidy would be exhausted, her jasmine perfume turning stale, her white power suit wrinkled. She would be realizing that vice president's daughter was a title that commanded obedience, but not respect, certainly not knowledge. She had the files.